Today, we are rejoined by David Morgan. He is the founder of the Morgan Report, author of the book, The Silver Manifesto, and has devoted more than 30 years to educating investors, making opportunities to prevent and protect, obviously, wealth depreciation and grow their wealth. He is a huge advocate for precious metals, especially silver. Welcome to the show again, David. Thanks for joining. How's it all going?
George, it's great, and thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Excellent, yeah. I guess we had you on the show sort of earlier on in the year. Things were slightly different, but almost predictable of where we are today in regards to the economy. Obviously, inflation is now rife and expected to increase, I'm sure. And also the devaluation of the dollar in the future, which we're expecting to occur as well. What's your thoughts on the current economy, as well as what potentially could be the case in the next few years and what to expect?
Well, my thoughts on the economy are that it's contracting. The overall global economy is contracting. You can look at the Baltic Dry Index, what the shipping magnets are doing across the world. And I think the number one, George, that almost everyone is familiar with is what's happened to the foodstuffs globally. There's been food processing plants that have blown up, caught on fire. There's been farmer protests in different countries. There's been a shortage of fertilizer. Without fertilizer and today's modern techniques for farming, you can't grow anything. So there's a very, it's not going to say a possibility, high probability or almost certainty that there will be tough times for a lot of people, especially the lower class. And just as a reminder, George, I know your viewers are probably aware of this, but I like to remind myself every now and again that 2 billion people on the planet live on less than $4 a day. So when you think about that and what $4 buys these days, it's pretty hard to, eke out a living at that amount. So that's my number one concern. The other one is oil. What's going on in the energy sector? That's critical. And last month's issue of the Morgan Report, the December issue, we went through a study that, I forget the gentleman's name, I should give him credit. It's his credit, not mine, but it was about a 2-hour video. And we went through it several times and took the high points out of it. Again, he took 2 years to do this study. So what he did was he said, what if we go green all the way and we quit using hydrocarbons? So we're not going to use oil in any form anymore. How much metal would we need to be able to generate the same amount of electricity energy, I should say? It would all be in electricity in this thought experiment. What would it take? So I started going mineral by mineral, and I forget all of them. I have them in the report, the exact numbers. But copper, I think it was something like 233 years of mining at the same rate that we mined in 2019 is what it would take to get enough copper out of the ground to go without oil. I mean, and all of them are like that. Cobalt, silver, you name it, lithium. They're all in like one. I think the least amount of time with silver, you'd have to mine silver for 121 years at the current rate of mining, which is very high, by the way. We mine almost 1 billion ounces a year, and that's unsustainable. So it's really kind of an in-your-face. Not that I'm against, some of the ideas that we're talking about, but like we need to determine for ourselves what the best path forward is. And to burn hydrocarbons to power an electric plant, to charge your EV, to go down the road with a smile thinking you've helped the environment, rethink it. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so those are my two main concerns, food and energy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're moving towards, obviously, the social credit score system in certain places, as well as moving that carbon credit stuff and all the global warming scam sort of agenda that's sort of now being pushed into gear a lot. And I think that's where the next sort of agenda will be pushed further is that. Recently in Oxford, they made us a 15-minute city where they sort of had 6 districts now, where if you have everything you need, apparently within 15 minutes walking distance. And if you exit that zone for more than 100 days per year, you get fined, I think, £70. People were like, oh, it's only £70. And it's like, and 100 days a year, like that's a long time away from your town and your home. But it's not about that. It's about what that precedent sets going forward. That's, again, being fined for movement. So, this can only increase in regards to the strictness of that. And they can basically increase that amount at any point, right? So, yeah, it's interesting times ahead. In regards to like the energy stuff, do you see how do you see it phasing out? Do you think it's going to be just a really quick event that basically phases these old school methods that the natural gases and the oils and all these things? Do you think they will be just phased out slowly, or do you foresee a kind of major event occurring that kind of like basically just quick fires the new system in?
I see it slightly differently. The way I see it is that Mother Nature is more powerful than any politician. So when the reality hits that we're going to, freeze to death in the winter, unless we charge up our natural gas plants and put heat out into the population, all of a sudden a lot of that green stuff's going to go out the window, and they'll use what they have and always have used. So I think there will be, especially looking at, not my report. I have to give credit to this gentleman that did the study, but it's impossible. So, and what's funny is during his lecture, and I watched it again a couple of times, I guess a major politician in the EU somewhere heard it or heard part of it. And he said, oh, I don't want to hear that. Come up with something different. Like, this reminds me of the Kuna Kente, goes out into the water and commands the waves to quit, coming in the shore. I mean, these people don't have a freaking clue. So I think that the natural forces will take over, where we are going to continue with the oil energy mixture and continue on. I think, in fact, it could get to a point where there's sort of a blowback on the green energy people. I'm not sure that will happen, but there's no way it can take place. It just can't. Now, excuse me, there is the possibility of 2 things. One, if there's a drastic population reduction, then you might be able to generate enough power. If the population base was, let's say, 1/10 as large as it is now, that would be one. And the other one would be that you just get into the carbon credit game, and you're basically just living in a box that's 12 by 12, and you get to go and walk your 50 minutes and do your thing and get to leave occasionally. And if you made it that efficient, you can, how many 12 by 12 boxes can you heat versus, the kind of rancher homes, they call them here in America, that are, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,500 square feet? A lot. So you can also do it that way. But I do not see it really taking place. I see the push going. I don't see it ending yet. But I think reality trumps all of these crazy ideas. But they're going to keep pushing them. They're going to keep, there's going to be a climate emergency or something. Who knows? Yeah. And I'm not saying the climate doesn't change. And I'm not saying humans don't contribute. But if you ever do a deep dive, you'll find that the sun has much more influence on the climate than the man-made carbon emissions. And you also, if you really dive not very deep, you find if a major volcano goes out and erupts for a week and a half, that'll put enough particles in the atmosphere to blow by what the human population has done for years. So there's some need for a reality check. And the problem that we have, George, and I think you're spearheading what you do and getting people to rethink it, take action, because you can rethink it and do nothing, and you're really in the same boat. But if you rethink it and take action, that's meaningful to your change. And you can get above the matrix, and you can, have a much more free life, a much more worthwhile life, rather than just being a cog in the machine. And you're told, here's your 12 by 12, here's what you can buy, here's your carbon credit. don't go outside too many times. We're going to fine you. And just to reiterate what you said a little bit, you said it, I just want to reemphasize it, that, 100 days and 70 pounds. That's how it starts. That's like the income tax in the U.S. Start at 1%. Going up to 90% a few times. So all of a sudden, it's like you can only leave 3 days, and the fine is, 12,000 pounds or some crazy thing, right?
It's interesting looking into COVID, just popped in my head. The whole COVID stuff where people stayed in their homes and all that. That kind of maybe is like a preemptive, like making the population used to being at home more, almost.
Oh, absolutely.
And it will be easier to move this agenda forward, because now people will travel less due to obviously economically, but also because they got used to that in the year and a half, 2 years that was going on. So yeah, that's an interesting aspect as well. But yeah, let's move on to your let's say your speciality, which is the silver and the precious metals, as a solution to exit the banking system. We did touch upon it on the last interview. I just wanted to get your updated view on moving outside of the banking system and what that strategy looks like on your side, what you think would be the best solution to exiting the banks and keeping your wealth outside the system, basically.
Well, there's a few ways in today's world we can do that. One is old school, and that's physical gold and silver coins. And then you have to get agreement on, the other party, if you make a transaction, that they're willing to accept it. And it is private, it is decentralized, and it's gone on for centuries. So there's step one. A subset of that is what's happened in, I think, 13 states in the U.S. that have passed legislation that you can use gold and silver in any transaction in the state as long as both parties agree. The problem is, George, it's very difficult to, throw out 4 silver Britannias, and then what do you get change in? You get in fiat, and what's the price today? But the way we've overcome that is 2 ways. One, we've got a program, and there are others that are on the blockchain. So to the merchant, it's transparent. You just use your phone or your debit card, and it takes the money in fiat, but it's actually debiting out physical metal in your account. The merchant doesn't care because it goes through the conventional banking system. There's a fellow here in town that basically perfected that years ago. I've had that debit card in my wallet for years, and I use it not every day, but every month. I have a few purchases on it, gasoline, groceries, doesn't matter. It's good anywhere. And it's very convenient because, again, the merchant doesn't care. They just get to swipe a card. But in the back office, you might say, I'm taking silver out of the vault and putting it into fiat, and then the merchant or the bank, it makes the settlement. The thing that I like about this program I'm describing is that you have 2 sides to the card. You have the metal side and you have the fiat side. So let's say I contribute my silver in there, and it's $28 an ounce, so I've got 100 ounces. So I've got 2,800 worth of debits in silver, but now silver's at 22. Well, I can just throw whatever, $500 in there, 200 or whatever, and just tell my associate that runs the system, I just want to, until silver gets above 28, I just want to debit out cash. That's it. And you can do that. So that's pretty cool. The other one, of course, is the blockchain that we talked about, the Lode.1 that I'm associated with. And the crypto space, I think there are some that will be very, very coveted over time. I think the precious metals cryptos will be part of that. I think anything that has a tangible asset that can be verified, like cobalt, lumber, oil, and services. I mean, it could be some software out there that's, monumentally efficient or helps speed or, whatever that comes to, to the marketplace. So I'm actually fairly bullish on crypto after this biggest mess that we've ever seen in the space subsides. And I don't think it's over yet. I know people that study it harder than me, and I study it pretty hard. that think that, Bitcoin has really stalled out at 17,000. It's a good time to get in. I'm looking for it to go down to at least 10. And the reason is that there's so much tie to Tether. And the Tether story really hasn't come out yet. When I did my crypto conspiracy series that we talked about last time, George, I pointed out that Jordan Belfort, who was the Wolf of Wall Street, did an interview a few years ago with one of the founders of Tether, and he basically called it a scam to this guy's face. Scam. This is a scam. And I'm not saying it is a scam, but what I am saying is the facts that we know as of today is FTX had a lot to do with the amount of Tether that moved across the board. And because we know now that's a fraud, then how much Tether was involved and what was the connection. And that remains to be determined. So I am telling anyone that follows my thinking that I'm not ready to see anything in the Bitcoin realm yet until we get a fix on what really happens with the Tether situation. And I'm afraid it's going to take the market down further.
Yeah, that's actually where our analyst is at as well, on the Renegade Lifestyle. He basically, we're pretty aligned on the fact that USDT could bring down the market pretty heavily. And to be honest, it is a scam, and it's likely to come into the fore at some point. The USDT thing, and it's the most used stablecoin, right? So
Right. Yeah.
this is basically one of the big. This will be bigger than FTX. So
Yes.
that is something that is definitely something that can happen in the next year. Let's see. Or that could be something that brings down the market at a later stage. But let's see where that goes. I wanted to touch upon the vaulting facility stuff that you mentioned there, in regards to precious metals, because we've come to the conclusion that vaulting your gold and silver is pretty much at risk to the centralized forces that be the governments, because they can basically, steal that as it's in a centralized facility. What are your thoughts on the vaulting stuff? Because obviously holding it in hand is as safe as it can be in a sense. Obviously there's risk with security on that side as well, but the vaults are potentially at risk, right?
Yes. First of all, no one knows, but your thinking is correct. My thoughts on it are this. If the bad guys were going to confiscate either or gold and silver, the best place they would go is on the exchange, which is the ETFs and the LBMA and the COMEX, because those are the biggest piles that are readily accessible. And they probably have some, in quotation marks, authority to do it. Some kind of emergency, monetary crisis. We need to remonetize gold, and we're going to send it to the Treasury, and the Treasury is going to have this gold so we can remonetize this and reboot the system. Silver could be. I don't see silver. Silver's monetary value is so low that unless silver went up, 1,000 times or something, it'd be insignificant as far as the monetary value of it is concerned. But there is another angle, and that's strategic resource needed for war, as an example. And that's where you could get into it. I think that the private vaults are pretty safe. So if you are in a non-bank, non-ETF facility, you're pretty safe. And I say pretty safe because there just came recently, I think it's been a few months now, this one depository called First State Depository in Delaware. And it turned out that they are in receivership because there's about $40 million worth of precious metals missing from the facility. Some of it's still there. People probably aren't going to get wiped out, but they may get, and I haven't done the math. I don't know if anyone's done the math yet. The receivership authorities will. But maybe you'll get 2/3 of it back, 1/3, I don't know. It's horrible. And the other idea about that is that facility was used for a couple of IRA self-independent IRA facilities that said, oh, you want to use gold or silver in your individual retirement account? Step right up. We'll set it up. Here's what you contribute. We'll buy the silver. We'll buy the gold. We'll buy the combination that you want. It'll be in your individual retirement account, and we're storing it at First State Depository. So how would you feel if your gold and silver exposure, you've been saving, let's say, for the last 15 years, averaging in over time as the market goes up and down, but knowing at the end of the day, you're probably going to preserve your wealth, if not build it somewhat. And then you find out that the IRA custodian picked a facility that basically was fraudulent.
So choose your vaulting facility wisely.
You need to read the contract, and most people don't. I mean, there's a couple of asset-backed cryptos out there, and if you read them, they have no liability at all, none. I mean, it basically says, if you read the contract, it says, if we don't have your metal, it's stolen, it disappears, or we never buy it. I'm adding that part. But anything you can think of that produces the fact that the metal doesn't exist, we're not liable. Well, if you sign that contract, then, they legally can take your, let you buy metal, stick it in the vault, say, yeah, I want a new vacation home. I'm taking this out and I'm going to buy it. Then later, 5 years down the road, you find out that the metal that you bought doesn't exist. I'm going to sue you. Go ahead, read your contract. It said I'm not liable. And this is true in some of the coin dealers. I mean, some of the coin dealers in the U.S., I'm sure it's probably true in the U.K., is very similar. I mean, and I get that they have to protect themselves. I mean, I'm not against making a contract that's fair, but it's not fair if anything at all you can imagine can happen in the metal, and if it disappears, then the entity that's responsible for it's not responsible. No, that's not right.
Yeah, I mean, vaulting is I guess just as risky as hold. I mean, it is a risk because it is in a centralized facility where government can at some point go and confiscate like they've done before. And I think there is a sort of a warning for that. I mean, it potentially may not happen, but there is a potential for that at some stage. But, like you said, it may not happen. And I guess where you have your vaulting facility could be an important strategy as well. I mean, countries like Panama, where, we kind of know an offshore, a vaulting facility there, which potentially would be a better area to be, but who knows? Again, like they can do the same thing anywhere, right? So keep in mind that vaulting can have those risks, but I guess again, the risk of holding it at home is that it's a security risk also. So you just have to weigh up these risks.
Well, I teach to do both. I mean, depends on who you are. If you're a rather modest investor and you have 1,000 or two in gold and silver, I would hide it at home. Don't hide it all in one place. Hide it in 2 or 3 places, and you're probably pretty good. If you're where you need to store it, then obviously you should have some at home if you can. Some people can't. And then I suggest you do it in 2 or 3 places. So, for example, in this IRA example, if any IRA participant used a different IRA custodian and put it in a different vault, and then another one, so that it was divided up 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, then they would have less risk. Yeah, it's a little more cumbersome, and yeah, it's more paperwork to fill out, but you're talking about your money and your future and your retirement account. So I think that's something that people need to consider. And back to basics, choose the facility as a private facility that's been in business for a while and get the contract. And if you can't read it or don't want to read it or don't understand it, pay somebody that can read it and make sure that you understand it, because you're playing nothing that bothers me more, George, than being in my position, not just me, but the idea of honest money, hard assets, the truth, everything that's represented in the monetary sphere with gold and silver. And yet it's not exempt from scams, just like crypto's not exempt from scams. And the vaults aren't exempt from scams because we have a problem. It's called the human being is in the equation. And that's the problem. And there's really no way to eliminate it. My thoughts on the blockchain are that purportedly it's an immutable ledger. So once you contribute silver to this depository, it's on there forever. We know when it came. We know where it's at. With today's technology, you could actually bail it in, which bailment, so just not a very cumbersome procedure, but you weigh it, you measure it, you determine, yep, it is 999 fine silver. So once that bailment process is complete, then it goes over on the shelf, and you could put up a camera that, watches that serial number 24/7 if you want it, without a lot of expense, really. So there is a way, but even there, you just don't know. I mean, if there's a power failure and someone goes in and takes a few bars down and paints up some mahogany wood and puts the numbers on them, I mean, people do crap, unfortunately, but that's the real world.
Yeah. Yeah. And also going back on the crypto side of things, which you mentioned, we're pretty bullish for the year ahead, potentially. But we don't see it as a solution going forward due to the trackability and the centralized internet that we still have. So there isn't actually a decentralized way of accessing the internet. For example, we still have to go through a third-party provider. Governments could easily just be like, you need a digital ID to enter the internet, as an example. So I believe, like right now, we have an opportunity to make maybe some wealth increases in the next year or so. But as a freedom solution, we're kind of weighing up the options with crypto, because although Bitcoin is, and other coins, especially like Bitcoin, let's say decentralized by name, we see though that it's fully trackable and censored. It can be censored because it is a fully transparent blockchain, and it's being used by many states at the moment. And our theory is that the smaller states of the world, like El Salvador and other places, will use Bitcoin potentially as their version of the CBDC, because they haven't got the infrastructures for CBDCs. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I totally agree, George. I've thought it through, and my thinking is identical. These smaller countries will just use probably Bitcoin or maybe XRP or who knows, but I think Bitcoin's the most likely. Although, as we mentioned, this Tether thing still bothers me. I do think you'll get a lift next year, but you got to be very selective of which ones. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the regulators going forward with this Bankman-Fried case. And the fallout, to me, is just starting. I mean, it's going to get, again, worse, I believe. But, from the ashes comes, the next leg up. And I think we will get that. It reminds me of the tech wreck where they just got overextended, and anybody that threw anything at the wall stuck for a brief moment in time. And then after the big correction happened, all that stuff didn't stick and it just disappeared totally. And I think you're going to see the same thing here with all these altcoins are just going to be gone. And you're going to have, I don't know how many, but a substantially less number than we have now. And governments want to regulate. They don't want any privacy. They don't want any freedom. And that's what the central bank digital currency gives them. And I'm still concerned that that's obviously the direction they want to go. And if it wasn't for China implementing it and having such success with it, I wouldn't be as concerned. But they have it for at least 400 million people. That's all they have. And of course, it's based on not only what's in their bank account, but their social credit score, which means you can control the population based on what you do during your life with either a camera that's watching you, or what you put on your social media channel, or what you write on your email, or if you smoke or whatever. It's very, very dystopian. It really upsets me. But this is what the control freaks want. Whether or not it comes to us globally or not, I'm not so sure that it will.
Yeah, it all depends on the people. But if they, I guess, beat down the masses so hard in regards to economically, they may not have a choice to accept. And it's up to the sort of alternative to try and find ways around their new system, which there always will, in my opinion, be ways around everything. Although it will be probably a little bit more difficult because it's very much tech-based. They'll have the technology to do a lot more, but I still think there is always ways around these enslavement systems. So there is light always at the end of these tunnels. But we're going through those sort of hard times, and there will be hard times ahead, but there will definitely be opportunities. And I think for the next year, we'll see good gains in crypto. I mean, in regards to, like you said, though, at the right times, I think there will be an opportunity, but then there is also an opportunity for the powers that be to create havoc again, and then just get people into the market next year, like just bring people in, because they don't see another alternative. As crypto goes up in value, their currency is being basically destroyed. Let's hop into crypto, get more people into the net, and then crash it again and just destroy everyone. But there will be an opportunity during that time to make significant income and then basically exit at the right times. And I think that's where you can make significant gains, put it into potentially precious metals, where I only see the value of precious metals increasing over the next years ahead. It's physical in your hand. It's got scarcity, for example, like we know. So it's going to be interesting. And also property prices, I believe, will be coming in at a discount soon. So, if people are looking to buy land and property and try and live off grid, or even just buy a property outright, I think there will be opportunities for that. It's just navigating this crazy market that's going to be occurring over the next, the decade, I believe, until 2030.
Could be. Yeah, I agree with you. I think we have some very tough times ahead on both the economy and the financial markets.
What are your thoughts on property in regards to prices falling off the cliff, or do you feel like there's still some time for that? Where do you see the property prices going? I think there's a lot of speculation that supply is going to flood the market, and there's going to be a definite sort of crash in regards to the market in property, right?
Yeah, I think strongly that the real estate market on aggregate is going down. And we also have to factor in these, sudden death syndrome things. I mean, again, I talked about in very extreme terms earlier in the interview that if you had an energy crisis, but the population was 1/10 what it is now, you wouldn't have an energy crisis. If you had a housing situation where all of a sudden, let's say, 25% of the population disappeared over the next 5 years or something, that would put the supply-demand curve in a different form. So there's that. But I do want to say something I get asked very often, and that is, hey, I've got X money in the bank. I've never bought a home, or I want to buy a home again. And you think real estate's going down, and what should I do? And I always tell everybody that asks that question, if you love the home and can afford it, buy it. Don't think about, don't think of it as an investment. Think about it, what it means to you, because living in your own place that you love is priceless. You can't put a price on it. As long as you can afford it, then just ignore what the market does, because you're buying it for a different purpose. Buying your own place to live is not an investment. It's a place to live. And so I've had, over the years, probably 10 people that have asked me that question, and I've always consistently given them that answer. Because, I could buy it for less. Well, maybe someone else would buy it, and maybe you got to wait another 2 years. Whereas if you just bought it and moved in and made it home, what's the price of that? It's priceless. So anyway, I just want to get that in there, George.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. That's definitely true. I used to think of property as just investment stuff, but now my whole mind has changed that, a property or land that is usable with trees and food and water and all these other things. These are literally life, and it's definitely not just you don't really need to care about the price. I guess it's more about affordability for people who are, let's say, looking to exit the matrix and go and find some land or a ranch or a property that they can just buy outright. I think there'll be opportunities, but yeah, for sure, if you can afford it now, I would be certainly just putting the money into those kind of things like farms and land and stuff like that, because it's not just an investment, it's usable, and it's something that if you have base foundation of life, which is food, shelter, water, you really don't need to worry if shit hits the fan too much. So this is definitely one of the main points that I think we're trying to get across here. But yeah, any last thoughts, David? Any last thoughts from you before we end?
My last thoughts are that as bleak as it sounds, it's probably going to be different than you and I outlined. People have the ability to adapt pretty easily. Not that there aren't hard times ahead, there are, but the one thing you can control through all this is your attitude. And if your attitude is, you know what, I'm going to meet whatever life throws at me with a positive attitude and make the best of it, that alone will go great ways. And if you're dependent on money solving the problems in too big a way, it'll probably fail, because in this kind of environment, money alone is not the solution. It's going to be, as you've done with your site and what you teach and what your newsletter says. As far as me, I'm doing a special on my paid service. If you go to silver123.net, that's silver123.net, got a $200 discount. And anyone that signs up before the end of the year will get a one-on-one with me for 15 minutes to make sure that I get to introduce myself to the new member and also hear their concerns. And it's been pretty interesting. I've done a few already, and quite enlightening. I mean, there's some really wonderful people out there, as you well know. So that's all I've got. I mean, if you want the free service, just go to themortgagereport.com and sign up.
Sounds good. Yeah, I second your comment there in regards to people and the mentality. I think people, even in our space, that can see what's going on are too engrossed in the conspiracy side of things and just looking at the negative news, because it's just as bad as the news that you're watching on CNN. If you're watching constantly the fear porn of the conspiracy space, also you're going to be trapped in fear and not make right decisions, and just be in fear and just sitting there hoping that things get better. There's always ways around everything, and there is nothing to fear. That is the main point. We're just having a brief experience as a human, and there will always be ways to navigate their systems. These guys are not all knowing, and they're not bigger than the actual cosmos, if you want to get all spiritual here, but there will always be ways around that, and you need to embrace that power. So yeah, thanks David for that little last note there, because that's definitely what we want to encompass here at the Renegade Lifestyle, is bring back the power to the person, because that is definitely where we will be able to navigate around and live a great life. But yeah, excellent. So yeah, I guess guys, check out the new website, renegadelifestyle.net, for our membership details. Remember to share and subscribe to the podcast if you know someone who might find some value in this episode and the podcast itself. Share it to them. I'll have all of the links in the show notes for David's stuff. It's been a pleasure again to have you on, doing some great work on the Morgan Report. So it's definitely worth checking out his stuff. So thanks again, David, and peace and love to you all, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.